and never take the higher road. There's no hope for a narcissist, that's what I'm told. Trying to be the bigger person, man, it gets so old. And just hope for something to put her in check and smash that ego, bring her down to reality where sanity is found. Instant karma, instant karma, instant karma, so I can see her.
This is my attempt at addressing some things about narcissism and facing a narcissist in family court. It's tough enough facing the chaos of a narcissist anywhere in life, but when there's legal and judicial orders and attorney's fees and thousands, if not hundreds of thousands of dollars, it can all get really intense and a slippery slope and walking on eggshells. I don't think gender specific. I happen to be a male, so this conversation comes from my lens, comes from the perspective of me, whatever my demographic is, for all that it is. In this case, male, melanated, from Colorado, in my 40s, yada, yada. So I don't do that to diminish anybody else's perspective or all the other people or ways that we can deal with and face narcissism or abuse in general. I think all types of abuse, it's good to heal. It's good to have awareness and attention. All forms of narcissism. I'm fairly new to learning about narcissism. So in somebody that's passionate about bringing awareness and raising awareness and prevention, prevention through education, trying to save other people from having to go through some of the things that, especially extreme narcissism, antisocial borderlines, what many of us have had to go through dealing with those relationships. So knowledge is potential power. That's why I've been doing my videos to problem solve, to bear witness to my experience, testimony to the Oregon courts and the shortcomings of family law and family courts and the adversarial attorney system and structure, and best interest of the child, much less constitutional rights. And at the end of the day, just the love revolution, prosperity, balance, health, happiness. That's dealing with the narcissist doesn't have to be in family court. That's just our pursuit of happiness in this life and facing obstacles and adversaries and doing our best to navigate those with compassion and wisdom. So obviously, those that have dealt with narcissists knows there's an infinite multitude of ways that the chaos can manifest, and the malice and ill will and manipulation and everything, all the coined terms, the flying monkeys, the hoovering, the gaslighting, everything else, the smear campaigns, the things that I've gone through, but so much more. Those are nice labels that certainly encapsulate a lot of what us face going through narcissistic abuse, but it's like most words. They're pointers, but they only do a certain amount of justice to describing all that is the creator and that much more. So certainly the same in this case when dealing with narcissism. That's often the problem, is it's hard to articulate your experience without victimization, and virtue signaling and all these things that we're trying to avoid. We're not trying to have weak dialogue and weak self speech and conversation. We're trying to focus on the negative is key. It's transformation back to something positive is alchemy, right? To focus on some of the most hardships that we see in this world and the contrast, why we have contrast, to see that which we don't like, to envision and inspire that which we do like, and then put applied faith and action and emotion and manifest that. Contrast helps us see what it is we love, the greatest, grandest vision of who we are. And so our pursuit for that, our pursuit for balance and happiness and self-determination mixed with the non-aggression principle getting into our freedom in this world and the value of rules and structure, but also how do you as a free sovereign deal with ill will, violations of the non-aggression principle, all of which obviously narcissists encapsulate because they only think of self and they discard you like a piece of trash, much less the way they use you and manipulate you and use you as a source, like vampires, and whether it's for money, for emotional attention, yada, all the things that come with narcissists and the complexity that it's certainly not to diminish or dehumanize humans with the many issues that we have. We all have shadow selves and demons, and narcissists happen to have this complex situation of mental constructs and tendencies that equal something that's dangerous to themselves and other people. And so, just like the mad dog theory, we try to approach it with compassion, humility, humaneness, and with boundaries and firm lines and morals and judgment, and if need be, force, because that's what we're looking at in a complex of ways, whether it's the women and using force through the state and child support and using the government and the men in blue and the district attorneys to extract resources from another human being, just like taxes and a lot of other systems of, what some people call theft, but certainly forced participation, to, the nonviolence, the non-aggression principle, to acting cooperatively, and that's what we would think the judicial system ultimately would reflect. And that's why we get into facing a narcissist in a court system that already has so many flaws and so many problems and so many disingenuous structures and foundations to begin with. And then you go in there facing a narcissist who's willing to, low blows. That's what exemplifies them. They're willing to say and do anything and take no responsibility and put all the blame. And so when you're in family court, that becomes a really serious, dangerous, scary thing. And that's why narcissists are abusers. And so coming from a male perspective, abuse is, to me, are things that have serious consequences, sometimes malintent, conscious intention of harm and ill will. But there's some people that are super damaged that they just don't even know. But I think the majority of narcissists, have some cognizant awareness of their demons and their tendencies and their destruction, their path of devastation left behind them. So there's a level of accountability. It's not like a mad dog that, just needs to be put out of its misery with compassion. It's people that really still have a place in society and have to manage, and we have to manage them. And that's why we're raising dialogues about this. It's not just about, in all of my philosophies, I'm not an advocate for just punishment and condemnation. I'm for rehabilitation, especially where it's possible, and healing and upliftment and progress. So it's not just a witch hunt, as a male, speaking of a male, like referencing the hashtag #MeToos and whatever the new one is, this is the end, or enough is, who knows what it is. There's so many of them, but you know what I'm talking about. And so we're now seeing the conversations and the responses and the acknowledgments of the backlash against the hashtag #MeToos, and with I think valid reason, and because we're seeing the bypassing of due process. I'm an advocate for due process. I think common law, I think there should be a healthy system with the help of our peers and objective third parties, people with good, high moral character, not what I've seen in some of these courtrooms, but the idea and the principle. And I think getting rid of, obviously, power corrupts, and the government, absolute power corrupts absolutely, and just wealth and, conflict of interests with these judges, with the ties to kickbacks from child support and all the other stuff that just gives incentive, just like attorneys, when there's incentive to drag out conflict and drag out discordance and fuel the fire for discordance, to make literally hundreds of thousands of dollars. It's tempting. That's high incentive to be immoral, to make the money, to pay the mortgage and pay for the yacht and pay for the trip to Europe and whatever these jet setters do, So we have to have checks and balances, strict scrutiny, as should be the principle for dealing with all family court in general. Strict scrutiny should be used in all of these cases, as well as the presumption of equality, 50-50 split, would solve so much of this. But that's what gets into gender bias. And in my perspective, just addressing what I've dealt with as a man with gender bias, coming off, models like the Duluth model, and I've been doing a lot of talking about the Duluth model and third wave feminism and the tendency to, I would say, both infantilize but also have a foundation and a knee-jerk reaction to protect women and believe women and secure women and punish men and blame men and toxic masculinity and the patriarchs. So that poses problems for good men. That poses problems for engaged, active fathers who are valuable, who are honorable, who are fit. And when we're talking about all this and constitutional rights and what should demand something very quickly to an equal 50-50 split, is because men and women both do have value, and that should be recognized. And of course we should work for that. And so when we're dealing with the Duluth model and the tender years doctrine and these things that have swayed the protection, the benefits, dare I say privilege, in this social justice warrior time of privilege and white male privilege and male privilege, right? I do think there's privilege, and I do think there's advantage, and that's a real thing. And so we don't want these words just to get lost in people who misuse words, who overuse words. Privilege is a real thing. Benefits and advantages are a real thing. And I think we see that statistically in family courts with the custody ratio going, 70 to 80% and higher to mothers and to women, and turning men into paychecks. Now you couple that with facing a narcissist in family court as a man, facing a woman, and the specific threats that you face in that specific dynamic, and honor and validation and acknowledgement to the women who face male narcissists, because I can't imagine. I try to put myself in other people's shoes typically, and learning about narcissism, just studying as much as I can on every angle and every aspect that I can, so I can be more informed, so I can have as many tools and as much information, as much wisdom to guide me that I can. And so I can put myself in basic situations, just the power dynamic of if I was a woman facing a male narcissist, and the strength difference, the physical threat difference, the differences that I think exemplify that there are things that aren't equal between men and women. The way narcissism is going to manifest and attack a woman from a man is different than the way a woman is going to attack a man as a female narc. And so, again, I just reiterate that my addressing specifically my perspective and through my lens of these family courts facing a female narcissist is only to add to the holisticness of the conversation, for the benefit of problem solving at the end, for education and healing and prevention. So It's with good intent that I just speak freely and try to speak authentically without too much limitation, worrying about blowback or misinterpretation or things getting lost in translation. So if I may, that is why I'm just speaking from the heart. So dealing with the complexities of family court, facing a female narcissist, and what I do call abuse, which is any extreme consequence that can come from another person, especially if they have ill intent and wicked ways and no accountability, whether from damage or otherwise. And so the severe consequences for me is like false accusations. That's one of the biggest things I hit on. And I think a common trait of men in family court dealing with female narcissists. And so a woman isn't going to, pummel a man and physically abuse him like the typical story of an abused woman who, physically, mentally, emotionally gets abused by a man. But the symptoms that come from a female narc are very different, types of emotional abuse and lying, and obviously the typical things, gaslighting and smear campaigns, that those things will be with all of the narcs. But I do think there will be subtle and not so subtle differences, and especially when we're talking about false accusations. I mean, all narcs lie, of course, so that's part of the smear campaign. False accusations with women specifically against men, typically domestic violence, fake domestic violence. I was accused of fake rape. I was accused of extortion and child abuse, lots of things that when I talk about extreme danger and extreme abuse, anybody that's willing to do that to somebody has mental issues, and it is severe abuse. So facing the risk and threat of being charged with a crime, indictment, jail time, felony, permanent protection orders, right? Continued felonies for breach of protection orders, to lower things, which are not lower when you're dealing with it, but character assassination, slander, all these kinds of things, losing jobs, losing business opportunities, all the destruction that can come from facing a narcissist. As a man facing false accusations of domestic violence against a woman, which is serious, obviously, rape against a woman, claims of sexual abuse, that is the Me Too campaign. So that's why I'm not pleading my case. I'm not trying to convince anybody at this time to believe my personal story. I'm speaking straight as people who have experienced this. Just as women say, you got to believe her. And I don't think it is about, that's due process. It's not just about believing everybody. I'm not asking for blind belief from people that don't know me about my story. I'm speaking to try to help people that aren't questioning their story, that know what they've gone through, and now are out problem solving, researching narcissism, researching cluster Bs, researching parental alienation if you're in family courts and dealing with a narcissist. And so that too is why I'm just speaking matter of fact and trying to help especially men that could and will face the same situation, to have some tools, to have some weapons, to know what you're facing, to have weapons for your heart, shields for your heart, so you don't get pummeled more, so you don't get devastated more. Losing children, especially as a man in family court, it's the most devastating thing I've ever experienced. And then the financial devastation on top, and then the betrayal from all that I learned dealing with a narcissist, and the unfolding of the many, many lies, and the shattering of your reality. I mean, it's a process. Obviously, that's why we have this community with narcissist support and narc support groups. So I know there's some here at the meetup groups that we go to in Boulder and in Denver and Colorado, and why they're important, why the people that have gone through it need the help, and what people need is different. Some really need emotional support. Some need education, need to know what flying monkeys are, need to know what smear campaigns are, have never heard these terms, or hoovering. And those are the light bulbs for a lot of people that have gone through these types of experiences. And so that's why, even for me, contributing as a melanated man in my demographic, feeling emasculated, going through it myself, feeling foolish and ashamed, and just the plethora of emotions and thoughts and ups and downs, crests and troughs that you go through in healing and in realization of many obstacles in life. But in this case, relationships with a narcissist. If you have children, that you can't go no contact with these people, and the best you can do is gray rock. So there's no co-parenting. There's only parallel parenting. And then that's leading into me for this video is when you're dealing with a narcissist like this in court, and a dangerous female narcissist, and as a respondent, that's what I am in the litigation, but as a parent, you're not a psychologist, all the things we learn about the complexities going into court, because you can't go in calling them a narcissist. You can't go in saying they have a mental disorder. You can't go in diagnosing them as a layman, and you're not a trained anything. Even though some of us that have gone through this and have put in the hours and the time and have found the answers and studied hours and hours and hours, know more than some of these shrinks, some of the psychologists out there, some of the social workers out there, some of these parental evaluators. My parental evaluator said he specialized in personality disorders. And this is just me. I believe my ex was a severe extreme narcissist on the high end of the spectrum. And there was just so much proof, and that's why we're doing this, and that's why I shine light on Oregon, and to the negligence is so much in my case, the looking over things, much less the terrible decisions, much less just a split where I get 2% and mother gets 98%, having 8 days a year. That's how just on a constitutional level, and guaranteed inalienable rights, equal protection under the law, right? No sexual discrimination. How can any intellectual person explain and justify that to me? 2% to 98% split. And then turning me into a paycheck, saying because I don't raise my kid, I have to pay Federal Reserve notes on top of that, fiat currency, debt money, usury money that puts me, my family, and everybody else in debt, right? We don't even get a sustainable currency to offer this weird financial child support instead of being a human parent to your child. Much less being allowed that, granted that. It's a privilege. It's become a privilege. That's the Constitution. You can't turn an inalienable right into a privilege. I digress, but it's all connected and part of the web that we're facing in this holistic healing of self, our families, our community, and then the nation at large, which is the many systems that make it up. The legal system is a very important part of that. And the social system as well. That's why all the social media and paying mind and attention to the destruction of families and the increase in narcissistic tendencies in general because of, Facebook, YouTube, the shopping and hunting for likes, and the new currency being attention, people focusing on you. That's like the new thing. Right? So that as a social thing, what's that going to do for narcissism at large? I mean, it's concerning, and that's why all the kids having the cell phones and parents letting them have YouTube accounts and Facebook accounts in grade school, middle school. That's crazy, staring at these blue screens. Like, we, as people who have dealt with narcissists, we need to be real mindful of first our own backyard, because that's where all healing and wisdom and elevation should start. So it's not out there screaming at everybody else, even our narcs. It's really being mindful and having these conversations so that we know what is working, what is protecting ourselves, and where there is room to help and heal, cure these people, if you will, where there's room to do that. Not out of ego, not out of forcing, again, your beliefs, your vision, your ideals on somebody else, but that slippery gray area of ethics and what's tolerable, what's ethical, ultimately what's a violation of the non-aggression principle, because I think it still all comes back to that. And continuing to define and refine, and it's still going to ebb and flow, but having more conversations about it certainly will advance us in clarity, in decisiveness, in recognition, so that we know what we're seeing. That's what we're seeing with the Me Too campaign. It's like, if you don't know if touching a knee or an ass is the same as rape or getting punched in the face or the throat, we're in bananas land as far as I'm concerned, because there is a spectrum. As a male, like violence with another man, there's obvious spectrums, because I've been in brawls, I've been in fistfights, and I've scrapped. That's totally different than being in a yelling match or having somebody cuss me out or curse me out, or curse my mama and my family out, you know, lower levels of aggression. So that's why we got to keep it common sense. The death of common sense. We can't let common sense die. Of course, there's a spectrum, and we got to start calling out these people that are making the conversation out in the ether. That's, as I understand, the threat and the danger of postmodernism. You know, that whatever you think can be the truth, and feelings are facts, and there's not a collective reality kind of thing. And I'm still learning myself, and that's why I'm studying, inspiring, and I'm trying to contribute something positive to the conversation. What I've learned, what I still have to learn, keep my mind open. So bringing this back to Cluster B's narcissist, female narcissist in court, when you're facing that as a man and you can't bring up that they're a narcissist, that they're engaging in parental alienation. That's what the lawyers I did have when I had lawyers. Most of my litigation, I've been self-represented, in propria persona, pro se. But when I did have attorneys, that they didn't want to deal with anything. The Constitution, I mean, talking about constitutional claims, no. Talk about lack of jurisdiction, no. Talk about definitely don't say property. Talk about property with children, no. Definitely don't talk about sovereignty and, you know, lack of jurisdiction through anything like that. They'll call you a freeman and a terrorist. So definitely be mindful, or have a good apprenticeship going, and a coach that really knows which angle you're taking and is backed by, whether it's legalese and the bar and British law, or the true common law, or national sovereignty law, admiralty law, private law, public law, whatever it is, constitutional law. It's so complex, right? That's the whole point, is like just not to know where you're looking, where the rules are, you know, what the language is, citizen and an individual, and all these things that change depending who you're talking to. It's like the death of common sense. And you get in there as an everyday good human who wants to be in your kid's life, and you watch these people from a different society talk about things you don't understand at all. Yet you know that not only intuitively, but actively, you know what it means to have family values. You know what good people are. You know what fit parents are. Right? You know what basic rights are. Things that somehow get lost in the hundreds of thousands of dollars and legalese and motions and petitions and all the paperwork that they pride themselves on as intellectuals. And all the common sense gets lost in the form. What happened to substance over form? If you put your peers on a jury, that's why getting rid of the jury for family court, it's like we got rid of the everyday peers who would judge you from your position, from closer to your perspective, your pool of social collective. So I think facing narcissists and some of this, if we got parents in there, we're going to have totally different decisions than these all-powerful single judges and the 2 attorneys they'll let come in there and do their little dance while they're officers of the court. Their true allegiance is to the court, not to the client. So that's a conflict of interest. It's all conflicts of interest and just conflicts of common sense, right? And which is so crucial if you're dealing with a narcissist, to not be in there and be able to speak freely about these things. But that it gets back to the critical mass. Like, the psychologists aren't with it. And so what does that mean? What does that mean that there's such a small percentage that really acknowledge this, especially when you get into parental alienation syndrome and how hard it is to diagnose that? It's like, as somebody that goes through it, it's maddening because it's so easy to see. You know, when a parent is just being a shit and like doesn't put their kid first. I mean, in my case, they never call me. They can't show anybody a record of them trying to include me. Every petition to the court petitions to remove me completely. My daughter's only 3.5. She's going to be 4. For 3.5 years, they've been petitioning to remove me from her life. Like, that exemplifies parental alienation. So it's like, you'd think somebody would look sideways at any parent trying to do that. And yet it gets into the gender bias. And I know when I'm online and I'm reading about parental alienation specifically, there's a lot of women on there saying, no, that's exactly what the men do. And I question the statistics of how many men get power in these courts with the gender biases and the Duluth models and the tender year doctrines to really have backing power to be an alienator as a narcissist. I don't care who slips through, who gets power as a narcissist. If a narcissist has power in court, it's devastating. And if you're facing that as a parent, as a human, as a woman or a man, I empathize with you because I have gone through it. So I don't care what gender. That's why I want awareness about this period, so that it's just like the non-aggression principle, like awareness period, so that anytime we see people violating the non-aggression principle, violating the rights and injuring other people, that we have means and ways and common sense know-how to acknowledge it and know what to do with it. Like, I'm for rules, I'm for organization and clarity and a certain degree of shared commonality. Driving on the right side of the road is safe. It's a good thing. It's a good thing that we all agreed on some of these societal structures. So, but it gets far from common sense when you're in these courts and you're dealing with them without a narcissist, much less with somebody who's really willing to use that extra system just as chaos and another tool, another vantage point to use and hurt, manipulate. So what I'll end with is one specific example that I'm going through, being a man in these situations, knowing what this narcissist is capable of, not being able to share it in that system. And now I have a court order, so we have a parental coordinator. Now we have to go to a parenting class, but it's an intensive, it's a 6-week. And so it's parenting beyond conflict, it's what it's called. So knowing what you know. So let's just flip roles. Let's say as a woman, you were beaten by this narcissist, or, you know, all the same things that, regardless of gender, the damage that they do. But if it's a severe threat and you have to face this person, you go into this situation and you can't even acknowledge that this person beat you and put your life in such extreme risk that you may have PTSD, you have severe reactions, and much less anxiety and justified fear in facing them. So much less going into a course like this, where then they're probably expecting you to act and look rational. And yet somebody dealing with a narcissist where there's no contact or gray rock at best, that's a really difficult area to be in, because you have all the eyes watching you, expecting you to be a normal, engaged, reasonable, flexible, understanding, compassionate parent. And you can't be all those things, period, whatever partnership you have with a narcissist. If it's your parent, if it's a child, if it's a lover, whatever it is, if it's a boss, it's still the same tactics to protect yourself. And so this happens to be in family court. So when you're expected to have more of an intimate, giving, nurturing, embracing, forgiving, all of that, like it's hard to mimic that and fake it, especially while you're still at risk of anything this person could do. I like to be recorded anytime I'm by this person, because I had serious false accusations of things that would send you to prison. So I don't ever trust being around her without a recording device, a spy camera. I'm loaded up to the T. That's why it's serious. And as a man, like, emasculating, and it's like your power, all your physical strength means nothing. You know, it's literally what kind of social protection you have, whether it's through the police and who wants to resort to police, you know, especially as somebody from street culture, like involving the police and the state and the government is the last thing we want to do. And it's a reflection of your own failures, you know, to crumble to the point where, especially with a lover or a partner or a family member or friend, otherwise, whatever, that you got to bring the police in. Like, that's a failure. That's a failure in control over emotions or whatever is going on. Obviously, something is not the highest vibration. It's not exemplifying wisdom keepers and peacekeepers and knowledge bearers and elders and leaders. So taking self-accountability always, obviously, that's what makes the narcissist different, that they're never looking at themselves. So those of us that are, and then that's the psychological torture that we go through dealing with them. And so I don't even have solutions for this dynamic. Excuse me. Which, you know, I feel bad about. I don't have solutions for what I'm sharing about going into a co-parenting class with a narcissist where you're expected to look cooperative. I'm just explaining, one, put it on the table. Maybe other people have solutions. What you do in that situation, what you do as a man who doesn't have a Duluth model to default and have empathy for him, have nurturing. And I've said some of that nurturing for women, I think, is really masked infantilizing. It's turning them into children and coddling them. So it's not even treating some of these, that's in my case specifically, treating her like an adult. It's wild. I have all the expectations and ramifications that they expect of what you should of all adults. Like, isn't that the point? I mean, that's responsibility and accountability. And these narcissists get people to, you know, that's how they find supplies, are by codependents and empaths, people that are caring, and their victimization. And it's the tall tales. That's what sucked many of us in to begin with. And it works well in court. And so it's about bringing awareness. Like, I didn't know what I was facing anywhere in court. I didn't know anything about narcissism. I didn't know anything about parental alienation. I had a good history, so I don't even have court history. So, like, dealing with law and learning positive law and basic stuff we should all know. Luckily, I got into constitutional law and sovereignty through indigenous rights and nationality. So I had some background in that, but that's totally different than having to go in and fight for your life and petition the court and proper procedure and all the things that you will face if you go into family court, much less if you're facing a high conflict litigation with a narcissist who would do whatever. God bless you if you find yourself in my position where you're facing a narcissist who seems to have endless money. And mine has spent over $200,000 litigating. I've spent over 100,000. I know they've spent over 200,000. So the real impacts of that's danger. That's why it's abuse. Somebody who would try to destroy your home, try to destroy your family, try to destroy your children. I have other child, and so just what these people are truly capable of when they're on the higher end of the spectrum. And so that's why I bring awareness to it. That's why I share my experience and try to bear witness and testimony, because we learn from our mistakes. We learn from exposure and experience. And I've been fumbling through much of this whole procedure to where they've fined me and they've punished me with liens, and I have to pay for attorney's fees because they say I waste the court's time, for even any attempt I do at fighting for more than 2%. Now I'm up to 4%. I get 15 days a year. I mean, that's insane, and I get punished for fighting, for questioning that, and I wonder why. I think that's the gender bias, and I think it's a total breakdown in the system. And then you factor in narcissism and the skills you need if you're facing a narcissist. And so that's why I want to share with people. That's why I want people to keep sharing with me, because I've learned so much from other people. If it weren't for my homegirl that told me originally about narcissism, and it took forever for her to convince me, no, it's not just selfish people. You got to look into it, and obviously, and then you go down the rabbit hole and it never ends, and your mind gets blown. So, but I give thanks for those who have raised awareness, most of who had to go through it. So that's why each one teach one, and we try to give back and pay it forward and do all that and protect ourselves and protect our loved ones. So if I can share information that helps somebody else that's on the front end of going into court, or maybe can avoid litigation, or can avoid aggravating a narcissist, right? Can learn how to gray rock and become boring and protect themselves, get themselves in a good position before it's let on that the jig is up and the narc lashes out and really tries to do it all, do the smear campaigns, take you out before you take them out, and whatever's going on in their head. And so whatever I can do to help educate, not as a means to punish and retaliate and have hatred in our heart or revenge, but to have everybody's best interest in our minds and in our hearts, and try to be progressive and problem solvers and optimistic, if there's a room to be optimistic in a narcissistic fallout. And so that's what we do. That's why I share my perspective, not to be mansplaining. Sorry to all the feminists, the third wave feminists, but to truly share from my heart and to share from my experience, because each angle I think that we take it at and learn from and see it from is going to help us acknowledge, experience, witness the whole, and then knowledge is potential power. Then we can try to problem solve that much better. So I'm going to leave it at that. I got a billion things I could say about specific incidences that I faced going into court, but this specific one is just happening right now. And I just think about it, and I wonder how many females have thought about that, put themselves in the man's perspective of what would it be like if you're facing the equivalent of a rapist. Think of a woman that would send a man to prison, where your odds of getting raped are through the roof, much less losing your life, much less living in a cage, having your financial and equitable opportunities trashed. That's assassination on the most serious level. It's not to compare and big victim competition, because there's so many types of devastating tragedies that happen from narcissists and just wicked people and damaged people, just hurt people. So it's truly not just about grandstanding and my pain is bigger than yours, just as it's not being stuck in victim speech and victim tendencies. Like, as people who go through hardship, like, it's still to be set on being warriors, on being, I keep watching my Rocky Balboa. Truly, like, I've had days where it gets me through the day. I'm like, I need that motivation. I listen to my Les Browns and my Jim Rohns and my Issa L's and just so many people that are my go-tos for a positive mental attitude and to bring me back to center, or to do my breathings and my meditations, drink my waters, be healthy the best that I can holistically. So that's why we give reminders. Take your magnesium, get your vitamin D. You got to get sunshine, get it to the pupils, get it on your skin, get the early sunshine and the end of day sunshine, not when you're out blistering your body at high noon or 3 o'clock. Be smart. If you don't get enough sunshine, take your vitamin D, D3s, and your B complex vitamins and your irons, and be mindful. Educate holistically about yourself, about full mind, body, spirit health, so that any adversary, any obstacle we're facing it with our strongest, most fit mind, body, and spirit. So let's keep sharing our experiences, not to echo chamber and not to beat the drum of, poor me, woe is me, but to focus on the negative is key. It's transformation back to something positive is alchemy. So let's keep transforming ourselves and our experiences for something better that benefits us, that elevates us. And I'm going to keep trying to do it for you. You keep trying to do it for me, and we'll keep building. My name is MCAD. It's a love revolution. I also go by Rad Dad. Hey, there's music for the soundtrack of the Love Revolution. It's at rhymesforthetimes.com. Rhymes4thetimes.com. Support us if you got means to support. And that's not just financial. That you can like the video, you can subscribe, you can reach out and have a dialogue. We can network. If you got something to offer the community or the conversation, let's build together and create a circuit and have energy flowing back and forth. So let's rise up. Peace and love. I'll check you next time. 1.
It's all coming together right here now. It's all coming together right here now. It's all coming together right here. Who's that? It's love. Can you feel it coming through that conscious revolutionary music? Yeah, you can feel it in your veins.
It's humbling in times when you need support, and it's humbling in times when you receive support. I'm just so thankful for the support I've received spiritually, emotionally, physically, and financially. So for those that want to donate, you can do so through our PayPal account. My email address is loveforpapa@gmail.com. That's love, the number 4, Papa, Poppa, @gmail.com. I have so much gratitude for the love and support I've received. That's all I can say. Thank you.